Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Hey, this is Jen. Welcome back to the Bible for Busy People podcast. I am probably showing my age here, but does anybody remember the game show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? The way it worked was this. The contestant was asked a series of trivia questions, and they got more and more difficult and worth more money as they went until they got to $1 million. There were 3 lifelines if you needed them, but only 3, and you could only use each once. One of them was phone a friend. You could call anybody you thought might have the answer to the question. Maybe a parent, sibling, aunt or uncle, a college roommate, or your best friend. So my point in all of this is, who would you call? Depending on the situation, I would probably call either my mom or dad. They have always been really good at Jeopardy, and they know facts and dates and details I would probably never remember. Let's take it a step further. What if you could ask the smartest person in the world any question you wanted? That's what our story is about today. We're reading in 1 Kings, starting in chapter 3, verses 1 through 15. It says, Solomon made an alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and married his daughter. He brought her to the city of David until he finished building his palace and the temple of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. The people, however, were still sacrificing at the high places because a temple had not yet been built for the name of the Lord. Solomon showed his love for the Lord by walking according to the instructions given him by his father David, except that he offered sacrifices and burned incense on the high places. The king went to Gibeon to offer sacrifices, for that was the most important high place, and Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, "Ask for whatever you want me to give you." Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him and have given him a son to sit on his throne to this very day. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people and to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" The Lord was pleased that Solomon had asked for this. So God said to him, "Since you have asked for this, and not for a long life or wealth for yourself, nor have asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. And if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands as David your father did, I will give you a long life." Then Solomon awoke and he realized it had been a dream. He returned to Jerusalem, stood before the ark of the Lord's covenant, and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then he gave a feast for all his court. After this interaction with God, many nations heard about Solomon's wisdom and arrived to listen to him. Solomon went on to build the long-awaited temple that his father David had partnered with God to design, and also to build a palace for himself. Here's an interesting note. It took 7 years to build the temple, but 13 years to build the palace. Solomon dedicated the temple and had the Ark of the Covenant brought in. He also recommitted to a family covenant with God, to serve God wholeheartedly and not turn away to other gods. However, we find out that later in life, Solomon married many women from foreign lands and was divided in his devotion to God. So splendor and riches and glory didn't work out too well for Solomon, sadly. But back to our story. We're reading now in 1 Kings chapter 10. When the Queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon and his relationship to the Lord, she came to test Solomon with hard questions. Arriving at Jerusalem with a very great caravan with camels carrying spices, large quantities of gold and precious stones, she came to Solomon and talked with him about all that she had on her mind. Solomon answered all her questions. Nothing was too hard for the king to explain to her. When the Queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon and the palace he had built, the food on his table, the seating of his officials, and the attending servants in their robes, his cupbearers, and the burnt offerings he made at the temple of the Lord, she was overwhelmed. She said to the king, "The report I heard in my own country about your achievements and your wisdom is true, but I did not believe these things until I came and saw with my own eyes. Indeed, not even half was told me. In wisdom and wealth wealth, you have far exceeded the report I heard. How happy your people must be. How happy your officials who continually stand before you and hear your wisdom. Praise be to the Lord your God, who has delighted in you and placed you on the throne of Israel. Because of the Lord's eternal love for Israel, he has made you king to maintain justice and righteousness. So they exchange some things back and forth, and then she leaves and returns to her own country. Now, 1 Kings 3 said that many nations heard about Solomon and even visited, but the Queen of Sheba had the spotlight in chapter 10. She was from southern Arabia, or modern-day Yemen, and she traveled, get this, 1,500 miles to Solomon in Jerusalem. That's a chariot ride through the desert, people, not a flight or a car trip. This verse also immediately tells us her intent to test Solomon with hard questions. What did she ask him about? We don't know, but I imagine it ran a range from everyday life to the divine, difficult questions about God. She likely would have seen the temple, and I assume Solomon praised God for his wisdom and splendor. I can imagine the two of them having deep theological debates. He answered all her questions, no sweat, and this translation says she was overwhelmed, but the Hebrew is translated to something like, it all took her breath away. What did she expect when she went, I'm wondering, when she was riding those 1,500 miles to Jerusalem? Again, we can only speculate, but I picture her having considered God, but holding on to her questions tightly and approaching Solomon with healthy, hopeful skepticism. Maybe he would be the one who could finally answer her questions about life, about our purpose, and about the world's design. And to actually have those answers to her questions filled her with awe. She praised God for all she saw. As the Enduring Word commentary points out, this is what God wanted for the nation of Israel at the time, to bless them so greatly through the covenant that their reputation as God's people would reach many nations. The Queen of Sheba came with humility, curiosity, and fellowship, and that's not the last time she shows up in Scripture. In Matthew 12, she was commended by Jesus for her seeking heart. I love how McLaren's exposition mentions that the Queen of Sheba went to see the temple and a king, and that Jesus is both the temple and the king, the greater one who was there with the people. I can imagine how frustrating it was for the people of the day to actually be among Jesus, but to not recognize him as the Son of God and the Messiah that he really is. So I'm wondering, how's your curiosity these days? How are you seeking God? In what ways are you getting your questions answered and finding the true temple and king? I'll leave you with that. Let's talk again tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to The Bible for Busy People. If you need prayer or want to go deeper in your faith, visit our show notes. Will you take a moment to share with a friend and leave a review? It helps the Bible get into even more people's minds and hearts. Find more podcasts that will recharge you at purposely.com.